Welcome back, Mistakes listeners. This is Dave speaking on behalf of Todd, and you know what that means? It's Parenting Mistakes time. This week we looked at ABC's Once Upon a Time, and you'll have to find out what we thought. I think you'll like it. This episode was recorded on 9/12/2015. This would be episode 23. As you know, we have social media locations. You can tweet us on Twitter at Parent Mistakes. And you can like us on Facebook at Parenting Mistakes. All right, well, I'm glad you're here, and sit back and enjoy the show.
So as you're aware, parenting... Should we start over?
No. It's just you and I. There you go. That's our intro today.
For the listening audience, we are professionals.
Yes, we are.
We know what we're doing.
Besides, we're limited on time.
We're always
screw
limited
around,
on time.
right?
That's right.
Jeez.
Okay, so I find parenting very interesting.
Why?
For a variety of reasons.
Why do I ask why?
This is going to bother you again, because I've got yet another observation without a nice, tight bedtime story conclusion.
That's okay. I can handle it.
So, as we've talked about, parents all have different sort of standards for what they allow their kids to do and watch and that sort of thing. Hence the genesis of this podcast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So,
wait a minute. I'm not sure absolutely, but it's just the direction the podcast is going.
Fair enough.
I shouldn't always just accept what you're saying.
So my wife and I are considered, I would say, in our own minds and in the minds of our children, and probably if you asked our peers, probably more on the conservative side of various things, including media, staying out late, that sort of thing. We tend to ask more of the questions. Where are you going? Who are you going with? Let me think about that sort of thing. So as you well know, my oldest is going to go to college next year. She's a senior. She's in the process of applying to colleges. And I would imagine you probably compare notes with other parents to a certain extent.
Oh, all the time. I can't help myself. Yep.
All right. So I just find it really interesting that at this phase of life, while we are perhaps the more conservative when it comes to college, and we found this with a number of our peers, that the idea of their child going away to college, as in far geographically far.
Right.
Is
geographically far away.
Far away.
As far as geography is concerned.
Get my grammar in the right order there.
Okay. Well, wait 1 second.
Getting on an airplane and going to college.
That's how far you have to go to be
Correct.
far. Because I went from Seattle to Spokane. That was 500 miles. I'd say that's far, but not...
That's fairly far.
It's not Calvin far.
Well, you still didn't come home for the weekend probably that often.
Not very often at all, no.
That you don't just pop home and do some laundry and that sort of thing.
Correct.
Okay. So what we're finding is some of our peers... I don't know if they listen to this or not, and I'm not going to identify them by name, but we have found some of our peers who...
Please don't. Sorry. Okay.
While we're on the more conservative end of...
Wait, when you say peers, are you saying friends? These are your friends, right? As of right now, they're your friends. Okay.
Yes. I was just using the more, I don't know, academic vernacular. How about that?
Okay. Because, sometimes you have people that are, at other locations that might not be your friends, per se, but are peers.
Fair enough.
Because they're peering at you.
Well, okay.
Sorry. Keep going.
I
do want to get to your destination.
So what we're finding is that...
Even though it's geographically far.
Yeah, geographically far. Yes. And metaphorically even farther. So while we see ourselves as the more conservative in terms of day-to-day media and all that kind of good stuff, the idea of our children going away to college, far away, on an airplane, that sort of thing, is very normal to us and very comfortable for us. And pretty much encouraged by us. In fact, we've said to our children, we would sort of like you to go a little ways to college. Not that we're sick of you, not that we would want you to go away, but just to see a different part of the country, part of the world, be in a slightly different subculture, be on your own.
Right.
So you can't just run home.
It actually, that jives, that vibes and jibes with me.
Right. But that's it's strange to me. I don't know if it's strange, it's interesting in that other parents that we would see as maybe being a little looser on the day-to-day stuff, the idea of their kid going away, far away, just frightens them. I mean, they're like, oh no, I don't want my kid to go that far. I need to keep my kid close. It's interesting, the contrast there.
Yeah, I mean, I know that living in the neighborhood that I do, we have a huge Vietnamese population here. And culturally speaking, a lot of these families will actually stay together pretty much their entire lives. It could just extend forever. Basically, kids, I'm not saying they never leave home, but sometimes they just don't leave home when the typical Caucasian family might, right?
Yes.
But it is a growing culture, right, amongst your classic Western American family.
Right. And I look at it from not just a cultural standpoint, but from a standpoint of what I perceive to be protection. So while we look at all this media and we say, all right, we want to expose our kids little by little to aspects of the world so that they understand it and can live in it and deal with it, we don't want to give them too much at a time. It's just, I don't know, it's a strange thing where you sort of say, okay, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Where are your standards? So there you go. There's my observation for the day. It's interesting.
Well, it's an interesting observation. I don't know if it, I can't say, does it bother you or not? I can't say it really. Well, okay. It's also, it's a time shift, right? I can guarantee you that my parents looked at me and said at the age of 18, either you're paying rent in our house or you're out, right? You had a choice, and if you weren't paying rent, you're on the street. This is literally how my parents put it to me. And they said, you can either go to college or pay rent. And I said, I think I'll go to college, right? They did not want me staying with them.
Well,
right?
and
they didn't want me close by. They wanted me gone, away, right?
And my wife and I were talking about this, and this applies also to the stuff that we watch and allow our kids to watch. Do we just do the things that are familiar to us? Because my wife and I both went away to college. That was normal. So are we just sort of following that same pattern? We like to think that we've thought through our decisions and have considered all the variables, but we also have to recognize that we do things sometimes just because that's what's been done in our family for a while.
Correct. Yeah, I can't say that I've read any books on it, to be honest with you. I'm sure there's a couple of books out there. I'm sure it's sort of like the nest that was always full, the full nest versus the empty nest, right?
Right.
I don't know. I haven't read that book.
Sounds like a good book title.
The Full Nest. Full Nest, yeah, that's right.
There's probably a book out there called The Full Nest, but
yeah, well, and of course it could be the sequel to The Full Quiver, which is another fun book as well.
That's a different story for a different day.
That's true. This does not once again lead into our show.
Awkward transition time.
Yeah, but I guess there's some parenting. What do we need?
Let me tell you what we need.
Okay.
Well, this is our 23rd episode, right?
Yeah, episode 23.
I mean, we do have an amazing, intro song, music, right?
Oh, yeah. I hum it all the time now.
We've got bumper music.
Yeah.
I think it's time that we dropped in a couple of sound effects.
Like what?
Well, like when we have an awkward transition, there could be like a warning, awkward transition, warning. You just drop that in when we don't have a segue of any sort.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I'd think about it. Is there a book on
Okay,
that?
so let's just yeah, we can work on that. Okay,
I'm glad that geography keeps us where we are at.
I think so. All right, so once upon a time.
Yeah, right.
Once upon a time, there was a podcast.
Now, have you watched this show prior to watching this show? This
I
show,
actually
to me,
have.
seems like a show that would be up you and your wife's alley, for sure.
Yeah, I actually have. And some folks listening might kind of wonder, like they might say, is Once Upon a Time really a kid's show? Why are you guys looking at this? Don't you usually look at the kids stuff? I picked this one because my daughter, who is 11, she is in 6th grade, requested to watch this show. So sort of fitting to the same sort of vein that we've talked about, some shows our kids just kind of watch, other ones they hear about at school, and then they come to you and say, hey, I'd like to watch this show. And it is kind of, I think it's probably similar to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in that it is, how do we want to say this? When something is on prime time on a network.
In this case, ABC, right?
ABC.
Yep, just like Agents.
There is sort of a, I don't know, I mean, rating system aside, I want to say that there's sort of always been this societal understanding that if it's on at a certain time, then it's still kind of in the recommended kid zone. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally. But just to be clear, this does appear on at 8 p.m.?
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
kind of the... I know, and again, some parents are like, well, my kids are up till 10:30 every night. And I'm like, okay, well, back in the old days, and again, with younger kids, what time do your kids go to bed?
They both have been sleep trained to go to bed at 8, which is
There
actually
you go.
true. Right at 8,
Yes.
they go to bed.
Yes, and when my kids are younger, they went to bed at 8 too. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so Once Upon a Time, so this is on ABC. It is going to be entering its 5th season.
Oh, now Meg stays up till 9 now? that what you're saying,
No, she's...
So it's a double ask then, right? It's a double ask. She's
She's
asking...
Not necessarily because, and we've talked about this with a number of shows, at least our family is not a watch a show when it's actually on family.
Oh, okay.
I would say my kids are fully in Netflix world.
Okay.
Like we literally don't watch. The only thing we watch live, I would say, is sports.
Sure.
And that's it. We don't watch shows, during the week. We don't have a DVR. We just don't go down that road. So, Once Upon a Time, American fairy tale drama series, and it's kind of got just all of your standard fairy tale characters. It's built around, the central premise is that it's built around a town called Storybrooke, which is in the state of Maine, and it's kind of hard to describe. It sort of goes back and forth between sort of fantasy worlds and real world.
Yeah,
Quote,
so
unquote, real world.
you've watched it, and obviously we watched this episode. I'm assuming then at some point Snow White was actually pulled from her realm
Yes.
and put in our realm. Is
Correct.
Storybrooke in our realm?
Storybrooke is in our realm in the
Okay.
state of Maine,
And
but
then-
there is also a fairy tale realm where all the characters wear their standard fairy tale names, but
Right.
then they get transported to our realm and there's a curse and they forget about who they are, and there's a lot of back and forth, and there is a ton of flashbacks back and forth.
Which permeated this episode for sure. as
Yeah,
you
every
watched it.
single episode has this.
Thankfully, we've all watched Lost to the point where we totally get that, looks like we're going back in time or forward or something.
Correct. So, and I can tell you, having watched, yes, my wife and I have watched all the seasons, and I can tell you that it's, in a lot of ways, very Disney. They take pretty much every character they can find and drop it in at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen Buzz Lightyear show up, but I would not be shocked if he made an appearance at some point.
Sure.
I mean, it's almost, yeah. We can
They've
talk-
introduced animated characters? Yes, they have. Yes, they've totally introduced animated characters.
Well, sure. They've taken most of the sort of standard characters that you've seen in sort of the iconic Disney epics and dropped them in and mixed them together.
Lilo and Stitch?
No, we have not. No Stitch yet. But, you've got Cinderella, you've got Snow White, you've got Evil Queen, you've got Jiminy Cricket, you've got Pinocchio, you've got Red Riding Hood, you've got the Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz, you've got Robin Hood, you've got Captain Hook, and they're all sort of going back for, Rumpelstiltskin. So you've got a number of what have come to be known as Disney characters, which are really, a lot of them which they purchased from previous fairy tales, mixed together with a bunch of other classic fairy tales.
Yep.
Okay, so your perspective, and I'm intrigued to know, particularly since you don't watch this show necessarily.
I have not watched a single episode of this show until this week.
Okay.
So coming into it, you know what it took? So it's basically 40 minutes of TV. I'd say it took me about half of that time to figure out what was happening. Again, thankfully, because TV is the way it is now, there's just so much going on prior to what's happening in the episode. I just start making assumptions that, I see some of the players, and now I can see they're kind of flashing forth back in time. So for me, what was interesting is the protagonist of this episode, which I know for a fact is typically Snow White and Prince Charming, but this week it was Captain Hook, right?
Yes.
If I didn't know better, I would say that Captain Hook was actually the central figure for this show. It's really weird because, well, it's I can't say twisted, but it is. So, for example, if I sit down and watch Peter Pan, Captain Hook is a twit, right? He is outsmarted by a bunch of Lost Boys every week, right?
Right.
I'll put it this way. I've watched enough Jake and the Netherland Pirates to understand that, Captain Hook is he's terrible, right? He's not awful. He's just, he's an imbecile. That's how I view Captain Hook.
He's a lousy manager.
Right. He's a lousy manager. He's all over the place. He's greedy. I'm trying to describe Captain Hook. And watching Captain Hook in this episode, it was more like watching Errol Flynn. Right?
Yes.
So obviously, the one thing I did get was that, and I can just assume here, is that once you make that transition to our world, you are no longer locked, per se, into what you were in Fairy Tale Land. Coming to our world gives you an opportunity to perhaps change some of the wrongs that you've done right, that you want to make right. Make wrongs right. And so this is a transformed Hook that I could see in this episode. So all that to say is that if this was truly the case and that Captain Hook has actually made some sort of transition from being kind of awful and insubordinate and greedy and all he wants is his ship to compassionate, sympathetic, dashing, Han Solo-ish, right? After he shot Greedo and all that stuff. Or, who knows who shot Greedo.
No, Han shot first, okay? Let's just make it clear.
The
philosophy of the show.
Yeah, so just to cut to the chase, I actually found it quite intriguing. I wasn't bored, right? In fact, I am sure, if I had to guess, that a lot of these characters that have been villains before, who now have different choices to make, are probably one of the prime drivers for people to watch the show. Gee, could Captain Hook make another bad choice? Could Captain Hook, bend his old ways and just become that greedy pirate that we all know he is? Or is he going to have compassion for folks? Is he going to, quote-unquote, do the right thing? With today's TV, you never know exactly what the right thing is. But it was pretty clear in this show that doing good things for other people, in Captain Hook's case, was a good thing to do. And I liked it.
Yeah, he's not very clearly the villain, and I can tell you, having watched the show, he's kind of on the good guy side,
right?
And they've sort of mixed that around. Yeah, it's interesting now, and we should remind our listeners, particularly if you're listening, if this is your first podcast episode that you've listened to, we watch one episode, I should say, of a show, and so oftentimes we will watch a show that we've maybe neither of us seen before. Sometimes one of us has seen it, and we recognize that when we watch one episode, then we are limited in the story, particularly a serialized show like this. This is not a single encapsulated show. You are confused, and you're supposed to be confused.
Okay.
Because the writers want you to go back and watch the whole series because it's
Sure.
a long, continuous story.
As with
Okay.
all TV today. But I can tell you, I got the tone. I understood. I mean, obviously there was some ongoing subplots with, hey, we need to take down the evil queen, or the evil queen is actually out to take us down. That's obviously probably a very long-running arc that's occurring throughout this series. And of course, when Captain Hook makes his right choice close to the end of the episode, he's duped by the evil queen.
Yes.
Right? And suddenly he's been cursed again. She curses a lot of people, this queen.
Well, he's duped by the Wicked Witch of the West.
Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry.
Gotta keep him straight. There's
Sorry.
there's multiple evil characters.
Okay. My bad. I'm really sorry. Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry,
It's
podcast
okay.
world.
That's right. Well, and that's and it's interesting too because I can tell you, I've been watching this show. It's confusing. It actually is. Like, even if you've watched this show a lot, there are a lot of narratives and sub-narratives, and they add in new characters all the time. And sometimes when you watch this show, it's sort of like, enough new characters, okay? We don't need more subplots. Which, again, okay, so we always sort of get into a discussion about the content of the show, the plot, and that sort of thing. Looking at it from a parenting standpoint, younger kids, say, later elementary, middle school, how do you feel about this type of content?
Okay, so let's just think about Meg in this case. I think, if we made a recommendation for Meg, let's say, because that's the kid that we're looking at, I think Meg is pretty sophisticated. But of course, you know what? If I were you, and you already have a pretty good grasp of it, for me, I'd actually have to watch a couple of episodes because I have a feeling that the show could probably get really dark.
Yes.
That was my gut. Just by watching the one show, it could get really dark. But at the same time, it appeared to me that and what I liked about the show again is specifically the character of Captain Hook. He is put in a position where there's actually this time travel element where he's remembering what he did before, which was he made an awful decision before. But now time has passed, and he is realizing, I wish I hadn't made that choice. And he chooses to do the right thing. And I'm like, well, it's a good message.
Sure.
I can't dog on that message. It's a good message. And, I've always felt like, just watching over the shoulder with my wife a little bit, that, the Snow White, Prince Charming thing has never been boy, those are the characters I'm really drawn to. But they seem, of course, wholesome. With the exception of this subplot where they're like, hey, we can't let... There's a weird subplot in which Captain Hook is given the responsibility to watch over some kid. Is this
Right.
Snow White's kid?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a long story. Yes.
Yeah, okay, and he obviously doesn't know that they're fantasy characters, I guess. I don't know.
Well, no, he does. Yeah, but sometimes he does.
Sometimes he does.
It's confusing.
It was, because I'm like, somehow, for some reason, they're concealing, I think this is Snow's kid, but they're concealing the fact that they're not fantasy characters. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It's confusing. Can I recommend it for somebody like Meg? Sure. But I would have to sit and watch a couple episodes to see how dark it got. Right? Because I can tell you, if we're comparing this to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I have watched thoroughly, there are some things that happens on Agents where I'm like, whoa, no, right? It's just too much.
Well, and I guess that's kind of the thing, and we talk about in some of our episodes parenting mistakes that people make. The mistake might be watching one episode and going, oh, this is okay. I can tell you that this episode was fairly tame. There are other episodes where you have characters sleeping with each other, where you have characters stabbing each other. I don't think they ripped any hearts out of this one, did they?
No.
Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah.
No, the only thing that happens is Blackbeard, right? Blackbeard's a nasty guy.
This episode is pretty tame. There's actually sort of a standard practice by a couple of the villains where they will like grab somebody's heart out of their chest, just like Indiana Jones Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Like that style, like they'll grab it out of their chest and they'll pull it out and they're just holding this heart.
Oh, jeez.
It's not like dripping with blood, but it's like glowing. And then
Right.
if they're really in a bad mood, they'll like crush the heart and it turns into dust and then the person drops dead.
Okay, right.
So,
So I'm telling you, my gut, just
Your
by
spidey
watching
sense-
the show,
your spidey sense
my
was
spidey
correct.
sense, just by watching one episode, I'm like, I can see where this could take a dark turn. It probably lines up with who's the blonde that was on the bridge.
well,
The blonde
that-
who's on the
that-
bridge, who's being tutored by I don't know who else.
Emma Swan is kind of the main character in a lot of ways.
Please forgive me. So Emma is the blonde, right? And she's
Emma's the
being
blonde.
tutored by who?
Well, she's being tutored by the evil queen.
Oh, okay, that's the evil queen.
That's the evil queen. Yeah.
Jeez.
And
So-
actually, this will make your head spin a little bit. Emma is actually the daughter of Snow White and Prince Charming.
Does she know that?
Yeah, she does.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. I can't recommend this show. Something's not right.
Well, because she was
Oh.
they were in the Enchanted Forest as an infant, and in order to save her, they put her in this magic tree and sent her to our realm. And so she grew up normal, and then they all showed up later. So they're like the same age, except that, yeah, I know.
Okay. All right. Well, but the evil queen, to practice magic with Emma, literally almost lets her die. I think that was a clue right there. Like, you need to be
Well, she threw her in the deep end of the pool. You know?
correct. But there's a moment there where I'm like, well, does the evil queen know that she's probably not going to save her own hiney here? And actually, there was actually a look on the evil queen's face, like, well,
Whoops.
whoops, right? And I thought, this show probably gets a little bit darker.
Well,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
do. I mean, you talked about the themes. The one thing that I do sort of like about this show is that it does. Kids do need to learn at some point that, okay, life isn't just as simple as, okay, here's the good guys, here's the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
There is other stuff, and to allow people to sort of say one of the basic premises, the basic premise of the show is that these characters are grappling with whether or not they are the good guys, the bad guys, and deciding whether or not they get to sort of determine their own destiny, whether they get to make choices, whether they are just going to be products of their environment,
Yep.
which, again, that fits a lot of normal human life. A kid grows up in a bad neighborhood and they see all sorts of bad stuff around them. They sit there and go, okay, am I just going to follow all the things that my neighbors do? Or am I going to say I'm going to go to college and get a good job and get out of this situation?
No, obviously that's the strength of the show, and it's actually the magic of our realm.
Yes.
Is that somebody like Captain Hook does not have to be a buffoon at the end of the day.
Correct.
He can actually be quite charming and do the right thing.
The caution, of course, is content, which is why, I would say you have to watch this show with great caution. It is not for little kids. And we've seen this before. This is a gateway drug from a Disney standpoint. It's the next step. So you go to Disneyland, you see all these characters, you see the animated movies, and then you see the live action version being promoted on television. You go, oh, cool. Cinderella, Snow White, Ariel, Captain Hook, Peter Pan. All our favorite characters. But this is definitely an adult version.
Yeah, no. And at the end of the day, again, I'd like to see a little bit more of it, but it's a good show. I mean,
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's an interesting show.
I didn't see that the writing was poor. I think like the acting was on par as well. I mean,
You want
it's all
a
there.
little spoiler?
Go ahead.
Peter Pan,
Yeah.
because you didn't see Peter Pan at all in this episode.
No, I did not see Peter Pan.
Let
me guess. Peter Pan's not so good.
Oh, he is a bad, angry dude.
Okay. Yeah.
Really angry dude.
So Peter. Oh, sure. And they've built all that angst that he's had because he's been a frustrated little boy all his life,
Oh
and
man,
now
yeah, he is like a angst-ridden teenager,
Yep.
just on crack. He's angry.
And it's to guess because the counterpoint is Captain Hook, who is stable, trying to do the right thing,
For the most
charming, right?
For the most
exactly. Right. Yeah,
All right.
and well, the center too obviously is the Swans, I'm assuming, and they're pretty much you're always going to expect. My guess is there's probably a few episodes here and there where they've pushed Snow White to the limit,
Oh yeah.
where she's had to make a couple of tough choices, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because writers can't resist. But
Yes. A few spots of darkness on her
Sure.
pure white heart. So.
but at the end of the day, and I'm sure there's some consequences for that as well. Sorry, I don't want to.
Oh, I won't go through the whole plot with you.
All right.
So you can follow us on
Well, wait,
social media. What?
So, what's the answer? Our audience is going to want to know.
What?
Is Meg going to be able to watch the show or not?
Probably not yet. I'm going to say probably not. Not quite. She is a pretty mature kid for her age, but I think there's a line sometimes with parents where you sort of have to say, okay, could she handle it? Yes. Does that mean that I need to give her all that she can handle right now? We're still talking about entertainment media.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm handing her a piece of literature and saying, okay, you can understand this now. You know, she is reading Shakespeare right now, which I'm sure some parents will go, oh, sure, you're going to let her read Shakespeare, but you're not going to let her, watch Once Upon a Time. But she's reading the Lego version of it, so.
Yeah. Oh, but. Okay. Okay.
That's a different story for a different day.
All right. Time to get to social media.
Social
now that
media.
you said social media.
So we're on Twitter, Parent Mistakes. Feel free to tweet us. We're also on Facebook, Parenting Mistakes. We would love to get comments from you, shows that we should watch or evaluate, things you like, things you dislike, things you think we should do in the future, sound effects you want to hear on the show.
Yeah, sound effects. Yeah. All right. Till next time.